Rick Harrison built an empire, but now it's falling apart piece by piece. The Pawn Stars show died quietly in 2025 with no explanation from the History Channel. His own son Corey called it all fake and moved to Mexico permanently. Rick's mother is suing him for allegedly stealing millions while she was unconscious in a hospital. And after losing his father, mother, and son in just a few years, Rick is desperately trying to rebuild with something called Pawn Stars 2.0. But industry insiders say he's really just trying to save himself from bankruptcy. Rick Harrison came into the world on March 27, 1965, in Lexington, North Carolina, and his family history already carried a weight he would feel for years. His father, Richard Benjamin Harrison Jr., had the strict discipline of a Navy man, while his mother, Joanne Rue Harrison, tried to hold everything together at home. Rick had an older sister named Sherry, but she died at 6. That loss left a quiet hole in the family. Then, in 1967, when Rick was only 2, the Navy sent his father to San Diego, and the whole family had to move again. It was the start of a life filled with packing, unpacking, and never staying long enough to feel settled. Each move meant new schools and new faces, and little by little it shaped Rick into someone who learned to adjust fast. When he turned 8, things got even harder. That was when the seizures started. He would lose control, and the episodes hit about once a month. Sometimes the muscles in his body hurt so badly afterward that he stayed in bed for days. While other kids ran around outside, he lay still in a dark room trying to recover. Time kept passing, and so did the chances to play, make friends, or feel normal. But something unexpected happened during those long, bedridden hours. He picked up books, then he kept picking them up, one after another, until reading became his world. He later said that reading saved his life because it filled the silence, kept his mind awake, and gave him something to love when his own body refused to cooperate. During those same years, he found a series called The Great Brain. There were 10 books, and he read every one of them like they were written just for him. The main character, Tom Fitzgerald, was a clever boy in Utah who always had a scheme ready. Rick liked the way Tom thought, the way he looked for angles and opportunities, and the way he pushed himself when things went wrong. Rick began to feel something similar growing in himself. He started thinking about money, deals, and ways to make things happen, even when the world seemed against him. The books taught him how to see problems as puzzles and how to balance ambition with a kind of honest awareness of consequences. In a childhood that felt out of his control, those stories gave him a sense of direction. But he was still a kid navigating pain and frustration, and by the time he reached 14, he was smoking marijuana. It gave him a sense of escape, but only for a moment. His parents sent him to rehab the same year. He went through daily sessions where counselors warned him about the risks he was taking. Those days were rough, but sitting in those rooms forced him to face himself in a way he hadn't before. Slowly, he began to understand that every choice stacked up. Every shortcut had a cost. He started seeing discipline as something he needed if he ever wanted a real shot at building a better life. School became another struggle. Because of the seizures, he missed so many days that he fell too far behind to catch up. By 9th or 10th grade, he decided there was no point in staying. Schools in the late 1970s were not set up to help kids with conditions like his, so he walked away. It was not because he failed. It was because life had already demanded a different path from him, and he started creating that path fast. By the early 1980s, he was living in Las Vegas and hustling at swap meets. That was where he became the first teenager in town to sell fake Gucci bags. He bought them in New York's Chinatown for about $10 and sold them for around $100. Some weekends, he made $2,000 for a teenager that was life-changing. He felt the thrill of creating something out of nothing, and he learned that every booming market attracts competition. When cheaper Asian imports started showing up, his profits dropped. Instead of quitting, he drove to the Los Angeles garment district and found a new lane. This time, it was fake Jordan Dash jeans. He bought pairs for about $15 and sold them for around $40 or $50. Once he shifted gears, money started coming in again. That willingness to pivot became a part of him. Around that same time, life took another turn. His girlfriend Kim became pregnant when he was 17. They had heartbreak early on, then welcomed their son Corey on April 27, 1983, only a few days after Rick turned 18. He chose to marry Kim, and in a city like Las Vegas, their young marriage became local talk. 2 years later, they had another son, Adam. But the pressure of young parenthood, mixed with Rick's non-stop hustling, pulled the marriage apart. By 1985, they divorced, and Rick took custody of both boys. That choice pushed him even harder, because now he had 2 lives depending on him. Then came the year that forced the entire Harrison family to start again. In April April 1981. A real estate collapse in Kentucky wiped out everything Rick's parents had built. They had only $5,000 left, and that money was supposed to cover a move, rent, food, and whatever came next. They headed to Las Vegas, hoping the city would give them a fresh start. Back then, Las Vegas was rougher, smaller, and nothing like the bright tourist center it eventually became. The Harrisons arrived knowing nobody, but within weeks, they opened the gold and silver coin shop. It was only 300 square feet, barely enough space for customers to walk in. Rick worked there by day and repossessed cars at night. They struggled to make even $100 on some days, but they kept showing up. There was also a strange law in the city during those years. No new pawn shop licenses could be issued until the population hit 250,000. In 1981, the population was around 25,000. City officials assumed that number would not be reached for decades. Rick refused to wait. Every week, he called the city statistician to track the population. He waited like this for 8 years. Then in April 1989, the number finally hit 250,000. Rick rushed to City Hall and got the license. That moment changed everything. The gold and silver pawn shop opened that same month at 713 Las Vegas Boulevard. It was still small, but it was theirs. In the first year, the shop turned a profit. By the mid-1990s, it was becoming a local landmark, one deal at a time. As the years moved forward, the numbers grew. By 2005, the shop was loaning out about $3 million each year. The average loan was between $75 and $150. Their interest income reached about $700,000 a year. They were handling thousands of deals, touching everything from broken jewelry to rare collectibles. It was an incredible climb from the days when the family arrived in Las Vegas with only $5,000 and a desperate need to rebuild. Rick Harrison spent years trying to change how people saw pawn shops. He wanted to move them away from the dark back alley image that made people think of trouble instead of trade. Back in 2003, he showed up briefly on Insomniac with Dave Attell, and that tiny bit of exposure gave the shop a spark. He held on to that spark and kept pushing. He visited production companies again and again, explaining that he wanted a family story wrapped inside a real business. He imagined something honest and entertaining at the same time. The first name he picked was Pawning History, but someone at Left Field Pictures looked at it and suggested something shorter. Pawn Stars felt sharp and catchy, and the little play on words made people smile. After years of knocking on doors, the History Channel finally said yes. And on July 19, 2009, the show aired for the first time. That moment changed everything for Rick. His persistence did not just bring a show to life, it changed how millions of people saw his industry. The show settled in fast. It premiered on July 19, 2009, and climbed up the ratings like it was meant to be there. By January 2011, one episode pulled in 7 million viewers, which became the most watched telecast in History Channel's run at the time. In that same year, it became the second highest rated reality show in America, with 6 million viewers per episode, right behind Jersey Shore. People loved the mix of history, humor, and family tension. That mix pushed the show around the world. Soon it was airing in over 150 countries and in 38 languages. It became a cultural wave more than a simple series. Once the show caught fire, the gold and silver pawn shop changed too. Before Pawn Stars, the shop saw maybe 70 to 100 people in a day. By 2010, that number jumped to more than 1,000 every single day. Then by 2013, it reached more than 5,000. It turned into a Las Vegas stop for tourists who wanted a little piece of the show they watched at home. To deal with the crowds, Rick opened an express pawn counter that same year. He hired almost 30 new employees and spent $400,000 upgrading the showroom until it grew to about 15,000 square feet. Even with all that space, filming rules forced the main cast to work the counter only when cameras were off, since customers needed privacy. Still, the shop kept running and the crowds kept coming. The cast's chemistry helped the show breathe. 3 generations stood behind the counter and each brought a different energy. Richard Harrison, known to everyone as the Old Man, watched over things until he retired in 2017. Rick became the center of the shop since he had been there since he was 13. Corey, known as Big Hoss, had started at age 9 and later stepped into the manager role. Austin Russell, the friend everyone called Chumley, joined when he was 21 and brought the jokes and wild moments that softened the sharper arguments. The slow clashes between Rick and Corey and the teasing aimed at Chumley felt real because they came from real history. That connection kept audiences hooked for more than a decade. Rick did not just make money from the cameras, he made some of his biggest deals on the show. One of the wildest moments happened when he paid $250,000 for 12 original drawings from Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are. The drawings from the mid-1960s were rare and powerful pieces of children's literature. Rick looked shocked while buying them and said he could not believe he was doing it. Even so, he knew how valuable that art was. Another massive purchase happened with a silver collection weighing 3,372 ounces. Rick bought it for $111,000. He explained on the show that silver does more than look pretty. It runs through phones, computers, and TVs because it is the best conductor of electricity. With silver sitting around $25 to $30 per ounce, the collection held both metal value and industrial demand. Then came the 1932 Lincoln Roadster for $95,000. Only 112 of those cars were ever made. The model was a crown jewel from its era and could reach around $170,000 at auction. Rick knew exactly what he was looking at. He saw the engineering, the rarity, and the future price. He also bought a Les Paul guitar for $90,000. This guitar once belonged to Mary Ford, the wife of Les Paul. That story behind the item made it more valuable than a normal vintage guitar because it linked directly to one of music's pioneers. Rick looked at it as a piece of living history. One item he could not bring home was the Robosaurus. It stood 45 feet tall, weighed 31 tons, and breathed fire like a metal monster. The price was $1 million. Corey joked that it was a little out of his budget. It was a spectacle more than a product, but seeing it on the show became one of those moments people never forgot. Away from the showroom and the cameras, Rick's personal life moved through a long line of marriages. His first marriage was to Kim Harrison in 1982. He was only 17. She was pregnant with Corey, and their second son, Adam, arrived in 1983. They divorced in 1985 because they were too young and unprepared. Kim said later that Rick put work ahead of their home life and that the two drifted apart until they barely spoke. Their son, Adam, died in January 2024 at the age of 39 from a fentanyl overdose. Rick later warned publicly about the opioid crisis. His second marriage was to Tracy Harrison in 1986 and lasted until 2011. They had one son together, Jake. Tracy stayed private, but records showed that the couple grew distant over time. Rick was always filming or running the shop, and that distance became too wide. They divorced quietly without fights or drama. Jake stayed close to both of them and built his own place in the show. Rick married again in 2013, this time to Deanna Burdett. They married in Laguna Beach with Danny Coker officiating. Through this marriage, Rick became stepfather to her 3 daughters, Serena, Tiana, and Marissa. The two stayed together until 2020. Court documents said their tastes and views drifted so far apart that they could not stay married. They settled everything privately. Rick later told TMZ that the split was mutual. He remained connected to her daughters even after the divorce. His fourth marriage came in 2021 to Amanda Palmer, but it lasted only until 2023. There were few details, very little publicity, and no public conflict. The marriage faded quietly and ended in less than 2 years. Then, in March 2025, Rick announced something new. He was engaged to Angie Polushkin, a registered nurse from Las Vegas. He said they got along well and had never fought. They started dating in early 2024. He proposed at a winery in Casablanca, Chile, with a 5-carat pear-shaped ring from his own pawn shop. He also said he was unsure about signing a prenup, even though he had skipped one in all previous marriages. He believed marriage should last forever, even while admitting that sometimes things fall apart. This engagement came not long after losing his son, Adam. It marked a strange mix of heartbreak and hope in his life. On March 9, 2016, the quiet rhythm of a normal day in Las Vegas broke when police arrived at Chumley's home with a warrant tied to a sexual assault allegation made by an employee from the gold and silver pawn shop. What they found inside shifted everything. Room after room held things that should not have been there. Officers uncovered 12 firearms tucked around the house, a mix of handguns, revolvers, rifles, and shotguns, some still loaded. They also found marijuana, methamphetamine, drug paraphernalia, and stacks of ammunition. Most of it was locked inside a ground floor vault. Those small amounts of drugs and clothing were scattered across other rooms. Chumley said later that everything was for personal use, but the law was clear. Anyone using controlled substances could not legally possess guns, so the officers seized everything. They even secured a warrant for a blood sample, believing that whatever happened during the alleged incident might have been influenced by drug use. Once the raid ended, the legal storm began. Chumley suddenly faced 20 felony charges that covered drug possession and weapon offenses. He spent one night in jail before posting a $62,000 bond. His attorney, Chesnoff, tried to push back by arguing that the search was illegal, but the weight of the evidence was heavy. By May 2016, Chumley realized the only way to avoid prison was to take a plea deal. He agreed to plead guilty to a felony weapons charge and a misdemeanor attempted drug possession charge. The court sentenced him to 3 years of probation, counseling, and the surrender of everything seized in the raid. If he stayed clean until 2019, the felony would disappear from his record, leaving only a misdemeanor. If he slipped even once, he could face up to 5 years in state prison. Through all this, the History Channel stayed silent. Pawn Stars kept airing without acknowledging anything. Industry insiders whispered that the network was distancing itself to protect the brand. Even though the sexual assault claim was dropped, the sheer number of felony charges made the situation too risky for public comment. Chumley vanished from events and interviews for months, and fans noticed the sudden silence. The network simply kept filming. The show moved on while one of its stars lived through the fallout off-screen. Then came another blow. Richard Harrison, known to millions as the Old Man, died on June 25, 2018, at age 77, after a long fight with Parkinson's disease. Viewers had watched him weaken over the years, his voice softer, his movements slower. Rick announced the news with a message that touched people everywhere. He wrote that he had lost a friend, a father, a teacher, and more. The History Channel released its own tribute, thanking him for the wisdom and charm that helped turn a small pawn shop into a famous Las Vegas landmark. He spent his last years at home surrounded by family, and when the show returned after his death, the sadness hung in the air. Rick tried to push through, but viewers could see the grief in him, especially knowing they had worked together since 1989. A year before his death, Richard made a surprising decision that shocked fans. In 2017, he updated his will and left out his youngest son, Christopher. The document clearly stated that he loved Christopher, but had intentionally chosen not to provide for him. No reason was offered. Rick, who served as executor, called it a private matter. Some speculated Christopher was already financially stable, while others believed there had been long-standing distance between them. Joseph and Joanne were named beneficiaries. The update fueled endless questions, especially because it was done so close to Richard's final year. The family turmoil grew even deeper in 2022. Joanne Harrison, Rick's mother, filed a lawsuit accusing him of tricking her into signing away her 51% stake in the pawn shop while she was in the hospital years earlier. The suit said she had been in a coma at Valley Hospital around 2000 or 2001 and did not understand what she was signing. She claimed she never received proper accounting of her equity, cash, or silver assets. She also pointed to a mysterious $3 million loan that she believed was taken out using her collateral. Her filing painted a painful picture of a family struggling with trust, grief, and old wounds after Richard's passing. Then the tragedy deepened. On January 19, 2024, Rick's son, Adam, was found unresponsive in a Las Vegas guest house where he had been living after a recent jail stay. He was only 39. The Clark County coroner ruled the cause of death as accidental fentanyl and methamphetamine toxicity. Both substances were found at lethal levels. Adam had battled addiction for years, moving in and out of rehab as Rick tried to pull him back onto solid ground. But relapse kept returning, and by the end, he was stuck in a cycle that he could not break. His death brought a wave of grief and pushed his family into the harsh spotlight again as the nation paid attention to the worsening fentanyl crisis. Rick spoke openly about what the loss did to him. He said there was nothing worse than losing a child. He talked about placing Adam in rehab several times. Each time he came out sober for a little while. Then he slipped again. Rick said he never imagined it would end like this. His honesty struck people who had been through the same pain. Many parents saw their own stories in his words. The interviews became a quiet reminder of how addiction can hollow out a family from the inside. After Adam's death, Rick stepped into a new role. He began speaking out about the fentanyl crisis, calling for stronger border control and stricter punishment for anyone selling the drug. He said fentanyl was flowing across borders with almost no resistance and that the country needed to do better. He even said anyone caught selling fentanyl should face life in prison because they were spreading poison. He praised what he saw as successful border enforcement in the previous administration, claiming crossings had once dropped by 98%. His voice added fuel to a growing national debate, pushing him into political conversations he had never been part of before. Then, in February 2025, another shift arrived. Pawn Stars went on indefinite hiatus after 16 years and 23 seasons. The contract with the History Channel expired and no renewal talks followed. Rick announced that the show had no active contract and no plans to film again. Fans around the world were stunned. The last season aired through April 2025. Suddenly, the long-running series that had defined a piece of reality TV history was simply paused. No one could say for how long or whether it would ever return. Months later, Rue Harrison added another twist. After filming Wrapped in June 2025, he announced he was moving to Tulum, Mexico, and would not return to the show. He said that all of them had been playing characters, and he felt it was time not to play one anymore. In Tulum, he kept a quieter life and began exploring the idea of opening a barbecue spot. His departure removed one of the show's familiar faces and made the future even more uncertain. Rick, however, did not stop dreaming. He began pitching a new version he called Pawn Stars 2.0. He spoke with multiple networks, including HBO. Nothing was confirmed, but he stayed hopeful. He wanted to rebuild the brand with a fresh concept and maybe a new cast. For longtime fans, even the possibility felt like a spark of hope. By 2025, Rick's net worth sat around $8 to $9 million. He built that through real estate, restaurants, merchandise, event appearances, and, of course, the shop that still draws thousands of visitors each year. Some events paid him more than $1,000 per appearance. His book, Licensed to Pawn, became a bestseller. The business empire he built showed how far he could go, even after waves of loss and controversy. Still, the last few years weighed heavily on him. His mother, Joanne, passed away in 2024 at age 85. Before that, he lost his father and then his son. He also faced the lawsuit connected to his mother's estate. The pain stacked up quietly, one loss after another. Yet he kept moving, trying to balance grief with responsibility, carrying the family legacy while so much around him changed.